All right. Thanks everybody for showing up. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We might have about as many people as we're going to get here. So appreciate you all being here. Yes, sir.
Why wasn't this advertised and spread throughout the community?
That's a great question.
Yes. The only reason why I found out,
Yes.
local media had it on their news channel. And I had 10 phone calls, and I didn't know diddly squat what was going on.
Interesting.
This wasn't even on the register for anything.
On the what?
Nobody knows about this.
Yep.
I think I'll have one tonight or what? I mean, we have, all the other meetings that we're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got one in February 2nd and what after the other day. But why wasn't this one for? You can see how many people found out about it. And now people are really going to try to figure out, okay, what are we doing? Because that's the first out of all the phone calls I got, 2 of them go, what is Fitchburg trying to hide? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to show off. So I mean, that's my concern right now is that, yeah, you look around, there's many people here. So, okay, sorry.
No, that's it is a concern that we want to think about. So I'm Phil Gruber, I'm the City Sustainability Specialist. We're here to share a little bit of information about our sustainability plan. I'm joined here by Ted Redmond, who is with a consultant we've got from Pale Blue Dot, a firm out of the St. Paul suburbs. They've been working with us since last summer. We spent a lot of time doing some background data and collection. Been trying to get into engagement. We're kind of trying to figure out the best recipe for engagement at this point. And so we've done a lot of online outreach, have reached out through a lot of the networks that I've got right now and asked them to spread the word. Definitely I'm not hitting everybody, and I'm trying to figure out those gaps and how to close them for sure. But the goal here tonight is to, one, people who are here get you a little bit more up to speed on the background for why we're doing this, what we hope to accomplish, where we are in the process right now, what comes next. But then also this is being recorded by Fact TV, so we're going to have this presentation available online afterwards. Certainly be sharing that link and asking folks to spread the word. In addition to, Ted will talk about some of the possibilities for engagement. We do have a planning team right now of about 20 community members that's part of this, but there are other opportunities for engagement that we absolutely want to get the word out to as many people as possible. It's not successful if we don't.
Is there taxpayers on that board or whatever that live in Fitchburg on it?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I've never heard of anybody that I know or anything, especially in the sort of the rural out there.
Mm-hmm.
They have a voice and stuff. So most of the people that get on it is someone that someone knows. So I'm trying to get rid of that and get it, make it heard that. It's just so. But before we go, Fitchburg is in a world of hurt for money. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to overexpend and go over our budget. How can we, or how do we pay for outsourcing? No offense, sir, but how does Fitchburg pay for you? I got to justify everything I spend, but I'm glad that we have people like that. But Fitchburg's in a world of hurt for money.
Can you introduce yourself? I'm not sure if everybody knows.
Oh, I'm Paul Sutton. I live down in Irish Lane in Sain.
Okay.
So sorry.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
But
yeah, so it would be the same as any other expenditure that's had to go through the budgetary process. The alders all considered it. The hope is that what's going to happen as a result of this plan is something that's going to move the needle for us, of course, on sustainability, but also a lot of these measures, especially things that are energy savers, are cost savers down the line. I can tell you, just as one example, we spent I think $300,000 on a solar array on 4 rooftops back in 2017. The payback on those is expected to be around a dozen years. Once you get past that point, you're making money as a city on saving energy on that investment. The same thing will happen if you purchase, if you buy a vehicle that uses less fuel, you might spend more upfront, but the long-term savings are in that. That's what we hope for with something like this, is that we're going to get long-term savings. My role is to pursue sustainability projects, and I can go through whatever set of projects I want, but if we don't have a sustainability plan that guides that tells me what to prioritize, and what the low-hanging fruit is, what's going to be the most impactful and save us the most money, then my role isn't really being used as efficiently as it could. And so that's part of this, is making sure that we have a kind of a framework and a set of guide rails that say, here are the things that are most important to Fitchburg, not just the staff, but the community. And that's why, we've done a public engagement survey. We're trying to do things like this in the planning team. So what things are most important, but also what's going to show us the best return in our environmental impact locally and more broadly, and in terms of making sure we're not wasting money on inefficient things.
Okay, just wondering.
Yep. No, it's good. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked.
Where are we in this project? Is this the beginning of it?
Ted is going to tell us. So I think the format here is Ted is going to kind of give this overview. He'll let us know where everything is, where it has been, and where it's going. And then there will be a little bit more opportunity for some question and answer, and some more feedback. So I'll mute myself and thank Ted again for driving here, and take it away.
Great. Hopefully you can hear me. And I can't see too well, so if I look like I'm scowling, it's because I can't see. So I'm sorry about that. But tonight, basically, just have a brief presentation to go through kind of where we're at in the process, what we're doing. And really what we're trying to do is to get input. So we're early on in the process, and so we want folks' input, their ideas, concerns, thoughts, etc. So we've got about a half hour or so presentation, and then some Q&A, and then we've got some boards up on the wall. We've got some Post-it notes and pens. Would love your thoughts, on the boards. You can also do it online if you'd like. So that's really what we're trying to do, is collect input tonight. Because we're early in the process. So starting off with an introduction. So I am Ted Redman. My background, I'm an architect, not registered in Wisconsin, used to be, but I'm still registered in Minnesota, and an urban planner. My firm, Pale Blue Dot, focuses entirely on sustainability and climate action planning. We've done 60 or so relevant projects for communities around the country, about 22 states. Most of our work is in the Midwest. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois are where the majority of our projects are. So the project that we're talking about here tonight is the creation of a sustainability action plan for the city of Fitchburg. The intent of the plan is to guide community-wide as well as municipal operations. The planning process is going to look at establishing overall goals, as well as strategies and then detailed actions that could be taken to meet those goals. A sustainability plan like this, the nature of the plan is that it's a broad, sort of comprehensive roadmap. It's a visionary document to try to help outline potential directions and sort of a menu of actions, if you will, that could be taken. Sustainability plans like this typically include climate mitigation and adaptation or resilience considerations. The City of Fitchburg plan is anticipated to include both. Mitigation, when we talk about it in this instance, is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, or our contributions to climate change. And adaptation is looking to develop ways to build resilience to potential impacts that are anticipated in the coming decades. So a plan like this, as I said, it's sort of comprehensive. It's a broad sort of vision document. It's organized around broad sectors, kind of community-wide sectors. We're anticipating it to include buildings and energy, transportation and land use considerations, solid waste and recycling, water, wastewater, and flooding, health and safety, local food and agriculture, green space, trees, ecosystem, and economy. And I was mentioning that in addition to sort of broad sustainability considerations, we can also anticipate mitigation or adaptation or resilience considerations. Those top three sectors, the buildings and energy, transportation, and solid waste, are where we get a lot of mitigation potential. With some adaptation, the other sectors we have a lot of adaptation potential or resilience potential. So the process that we are going through, it's kind of a three-phased sort of effort. Our first phase, as Phil was mentioning here at the beginning, is kind of a baseline documentation sort of effort, where we're just trying to turn over as many rocks as we can, collect as much data as community-specific as we can find through census data, other data sets, creation of a greenhouse gas inventory, which is really sort of a consumption inventory. How much electricity are we using? How much natural gas are we using? How many miles are we driving in a year, etc. We take all that information then and we put together into a baseline document. And then we move into a collaborative planning process. And as Phil was mentioning, our planning team is made up of about 20, 25 folks, some city staff, and then volunteers, community members that were solicited through actually a pretty long period of time. I know that there's some notices going out as well as through the survey that was noticed out there also. But we'll be collaborating with that team to sort of establish potential goals and then looking at strategies and detailed actions to achieve those goals. Once we have a draft plan, then we'll get that out for review with community members and others, and then sort of incorporate whatever changes are appropriate into that final plan. Along the way, we've got community engagement, which are those sort of orange bars down at the bottom. And so we've had an online survey open for, I think, since August. It's been quite a while. And so we'll start to bring that to a close here in the next couple of weeks so that we can then summarize what we're seeing in the survey. Community meetings, and then when we have the draft plan, we will do those sorts of outreaches again with the draft plan so that folks can see the draft plan and give us input. So as far as where we are right now, we are just now transitioning into that planning team process. So all of the input that we receive tonight or online or through the survey documents, we'll be summarizing and sharing all of that with the planning team so that input can be processed as a part of that conversation. So I mentioned that our first part of the effort was doing some baseline documentation. We did 4 what I call foundational documents that were then summarized into an overall summary document. So the 4 foundational documents included a vulnerability assessment, greenhouse gas inventory and forecast, a ground cover study, where we look at tree coverage, grass coverage, impervious surface coverage, etc., and a renewable energy potential study. Each of those are community-wide sort of assessments. Those all then were summarized into the baseline assessment document. And in that document, we organized what we've discovered or what we see based on the sector that's anticipated in the plan. And then we also put forth potential starter goals. Those potential starter goals are up on the wall tonight. And the intent of really all of this work, but especially the baseline document, is to provide a place for the planning team, the planning discussion to start. We found that if we start with a blank piece of paper, it can be very difficult for a collaborative team to kind of get their footing and start sharing ideas. We found that if we can put something on the wall, people can respond to that and then start getting the hang of thinking about what they would like to share. So that's really what we're trying to do, is to help support the initiation of the conversation. Those documents, by the way, are available. We have a public-facing website that's linked down at the bottom there, paleblue.LLC/Fitchburg Sustainability. So I just want to give you a little bit of highlight of what some of these documents have in it. For the vulnerability assessment, we're looking at long-range impacts. And this illustrates climate changes that have happened since 1895. On my side, it's this way, but I think as you're looking at it, on the left side is 1895, all the way over on the right side is through 2021. This is put together by a group called Climate Stripes. If it's a blue bar, it means it's colder than average. If it's a red bar, it means it's warmer than average, or pink, meaning slightly. One thing when it comes to climate averages, that it's actually, climate science is based on 30 rolling averages. So that if it's a red bar on the right side, it would be even redder when compared with a blue bar on the left side. It's just how climate science works. I didn't make it up. I wish it was something a little bit different there, because the rolling average can be hard to get your head around sometimes. But kind of distilling down our projections, as we look out into the future, by 2050, so just within the next couple of decades, we can anticipate Fitchburg to be roughly 3 to 5 degrees warmer. That's an average annual temperature than now. That's in Fahrenheit. We can expect an increase of another 12 to 15 days above 95 degrees temperature. We can expect a commensurate increase of about 45% in air conditioning demand. We can expect about 5% increase in total average rainfall. And more importantly, we can expect about a 20% increase in heavy precipitation. The reason for that is that our trends are that we're seeing precipitation start to pull apart. We're having more days between precipitation. So that means when we get it, it'll tend to come heavier. That's important for a couple of reasons. Heavier precipitation means more potential for flooding, just as you can expect having a 2-inch rainfall versus a 1/2 inch rainfall. But also as it comes and hits dry land, that also will have a tendency of wanting to run off. Dry land won't accept that water quite the same. And we can expect an increase, of course, in growing season, which is fantastic when we're thinking of tomatoes and such, but it also means an increase in allergens, things like mosquitoes or ticks that can be vectors for disease also. If we do not curb our emissions here globally, we can expect those trends to continue to increase through the end of the century. However, if we can reduce our emissions, we can start to curb those impacts past 2050. One way I like to think about these sort of future projections is thinking about communities that have the kinds of summers that we can anticipate. By the end of the century, we can expect average temperatures to be about 10 degrees warmer Fahrenheit. That's similar to summers in Montgomery, Alabama. So that's pretty much like picking Fitchburg up and moving it south about 10 miles every year, or about 145 feet every day between now and the end of the century. So that illustrates the importance of wanting to address our greenhouse gas emissions in the long run. In terms of vulnerability, there are primary and economic risks. The blue dots are the primary climate risks. They're things like extreme weather and temperature, flooding, air quality, vector-borne diseases, food insecurity, water quality, waterborne diseases, power or infrastructure failure, and wildfire. Economic-related risks include crop yield, mortality concerns, energy costs, as well as crime costs. There are other potential economic risks that we do not have on there because we don't have data relative to that. But that would be, for instance, increased potential property damage through extreme weather events. And of course, we all live in the world, so if there is an increase in extreme weather events or something like that, we all have vulnerability to it. In terms of planning to address overall community sustainability relative to these things, the approach is to think about folks that might have increased or the potential of increased vulnerability to some of these risks. And so those different categories of demographics are what are commonly identified as folks that could have increased vulnerability. Typically it comes about from, it could be due to resource, or could be due to mobility or independence. or just other coexisting risks that these sorts of vulnerabilities could exacerbate. The other thing to point out is that pretty much all of us are probably on that list somewhere, or used to be on that list somewhere, or will be on that list somewhere. So what it really is about thinking about the different ways in which our community might have vulnerabilities so that we can address those. Through the vulnerability assessment, we've identified what we would think might be, if we need to prioritize, where the priorities might be. That isn't to say that we would want to ignore any concern or ignore any population group at all, just simply indicating where we might get the greatest bang for the buck, so to speak, in terms of focused opportunities. In the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast document, we did inventories for 3 subject years, 2014, 2018, and 2022. We do that so that we get, rather than a snapshot, we get a sense of trends and changes. And so one of the good news is that over that 8-year period, we're seeing emissions decrease. They've dropped about 6%, which is fantastic. That decrease has really been driven by electricity, continued increasing cleanliness of the grid, so to speak. We've seen an increase in population by about 14%, an increase in our GDP, or at least Fitchburg's share of the county's GDP. GDP data is available at the county level. It's not aggregated down to the city, so we do pro rata share on that. And we've seen an increase in employment, which is an interesting illustration that we can actually address GHG emissions without a shrinking economy or population. The largest sector of our emissions right now is still electricity, even though that it has been continuing to decrease in its emissions, followed by transportation at about 32%, and then heating fuel at about 20%. We also we keep a database of inventories from communities kind of around the Midwest or throughout the country, actually. And just for purposes of kind of seeing how do we fit in with the crowd, we look at it on a per capita basis so that we can kind of ignore size of community. We can now get it down to a person-by-person sort of evaluation. And throughout the sort of region, Fitchburg's kind of in the center. On the chart at the bottom, which is maybe a little bit easier to read, if it's a light gray bar, those are other Wisconsin communities. If it's a black bar, then those are communities, outside in other Midwestern states. And Fitchburg's pretty much right in the center, which is good. It illustrates that we've got some things to work with, particularly as we look at what we call a business as usual forecast. So this is a greenhouse gas emissions forecast into the future through 2050, and this is based on information that we can have available to us now, assuming nothing else changes. So in other words, we're anticipating population changes because that's information we have available to us. We are also assuming that known commitments are met. So for instance, the electric utilities commitments towards emission reduction and renewable energy, we're assuming are met because it's a public commitment. So those things that we can know are included in the projections, but beyond that, we don't assume any further changes, any further actions taken that are not yet known commitments. And so the good news is that what we can see is that our overall emissions as we move into the future will continue to decrease, we believe, which is great. That's going to be made up really, as far as our current projections are, almost entirely out of our electric grid. The natural gas sector and transportation sector are likely going to stay essentially flat. Natural gas may grow relative to population growth, really. Transportation will likely shrink a little bit due to increasing fuel efficiency and some adoption we can assume will happen with EVs no matter what. So those will start to drive transportation down a little bit. But our long-term reductions are, so it's a positive trend that we can anticipate, but it's not at the pace that ultimately we need. Those two yellow dashed lines that you see illustrate where science tells us we need to be in order to curb global warming. The top yellow dashed bar is if we wanted to curb global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. The bottom bar or line is where we want to aim if we want to curb global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The ground cover study. So this assessment is looking to just understand the various conditions of ground cover and to be able to relate it to census data and other information that we can get through census tract data. It helps us look at things like tree canopy coverage, stormwater runoff, potential impacts relative to stormwater, grass coverage, impervious surface coverage, how that might impact microheat island, and to be able to relate it with demographic information to understand if there are any linkages or opportunities to address vulnerabilities. For Fitchburg, the map I'll call out, so you'll see that we've got the boundary of the city of Fitchburg. This mapping is done at the census tract level, and the census tracts and the city boundaries do not overlap. We don't have any control over that, unfortunately, it just is. So that's why these maps illustrate the census data, but it really does capture, by and large, the largest share of population that live in the city of Fitchburg. The GHG inventory, by the way, is boundary. That's city boundary. So out of that assessment, we know that our tree canopy coverage citywide is about 22%. We've got about 30%, which is grass coverage. We've got agriculture coverage, which is about 32%. Water at just a little under 2%. Impervious surfaces that are light, so think concrete pavement or like a white roof or a light colored roof, are about 5%, 5.5%. And then dark impervious surfaces, so think asphalt or dark asphalt roof, things like that, are about 10%. Now, the importance for some of those things, the dark impervious surfaces really impact microheat island. Think about a really hot day where you're walking across, say, just envision a very large parking lot, asphalt parking lot, and what that feels like, or what that can retain heat, versus walking across a grass field, right? So those breakdown of those types of surfaces, we can anticipate some things relative to microheat island, as well as things like stormwater runoff. So if we have a heavy stormwater event, we have lots of impervious surfaces, that's an area that could have some potential vulnerabilities to flash flood. In terms of our grass coverage, we've got about 25%, and I'm sorry, this chart has the labeling is down below, but 25% is lawn, so that's manicured lawn, things that we're mowing, potentially fertilizing or using pesticide on. About 54% of green growies that are not trees is agriculture, and then about 20% is native grasses or prairie grass or the like, wildflower. Now, I said that we do these sorts of readings based on a demographic or on a census tract basis. That's so we can see if there's any relationships to demographics. And actually, in most communities, we find that there's usually a pretty direct relationship between low-income populations and tree canopy coverage. And interestingly, in Fitchburg, we're not seeing a distinct relationship there. It's maybe one of the first, maybe a second community that I've seen that with. Usually, there's a pretty direct line. There does, however, seem to be some relationship between impervious surfaces, particularly dark impervious surfaces, and communities with higher shares of low income. So just illustrates some things that we can think about as we think about vulnerabilities or opportunities to continue to improve. So part of the reason why we do this is we just illustrate, the city does have a tree canopy goal for the area inside the urban services area, and that's sort of a faint kind of a pinkish red line or brownish red line. The area inside there does have a tree canopy goal, and so we've put forth an illustration of what meeting that goal might look like, especially through prioritizing where trees might go with a few frameworks. One saying if you're going to plant a tree, that's put it not on top of a building, not on top of a land use that a tree doesn't belong on, which would be a building or a farm. We're assuming farms stay farms. We're not going to plant forests on them. Of course, a farmer could do that if they wanted to. So the land where we can put trees, and also land where a tree is going to give us the greatest benefit. So where it might benefit the most people, so density of population. Also where it might help to reduce micro heat island issues, so where we have high amounts of impervious surfaces, so where that tree can give us more benefit, etc. So we've mapped that out and illustrated how many trees we might need to plant in order to reach the city's goal within that urban service area, and also kind of extended that beyond the urban service area to the rest of the city. And the intent here is just to create linkage between if we have a tree goal and we want to get there, what does that mean to achieve that? What might we need to do to reach that? The last foundational document is a renewable energy potential study. This we're using data from National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It's a national lab in Colorado, as well as data from NASA and satellite data. And we can project then total rooftop capacity throughout the city. We then take total capacity and we kind of taper that down to rooftop arrays that should likely be able to be reasonably cost effective. So in other words, we're not putting arrays on north-facing roofs where we can assume that it may not be financially appropriate. And then we've also just illustrated if we took a certain amount of land and tried to target some some carport, which is a structured array like what's imaged, or ground-mounted arrays. The intent here is to sort of illustrate a potential capacity for distributed renewable energy in the community. We do this because we've seen lots of plans that we think have goals that are lovely but maybe not necessarily achievable. We've seen communities say things like, we want to have 100% renewable energy distributed by Tuesday, where I love your energy, but it's not, we know that can't be achieved. So that's our intent here, is just to illustrate potential capacity so that we can start linking goals or actions with what is likely achievable or understand where it starts becoming difficult to achieve. We also looked at other forms of renewable energy, a waste-to-energy approach, which is known as gasification, which is a zero-emission waste-to-energy. The interesting thing about that is that the energy form can be used for electricity. It can also be turned into hydrogen. So that means we can use hydrogen fuel. It can also be turned into renewable diesel, or it can be turned into ammonia. And once we have ammonia, we can now also turn it into fertilizer. So we've just illustrated that. The gasification is really not necessarily something that Fitchburg by itself would probably get into, but it may be something to consider at a regional scale because it does offer some potential relative to transition. And then, as I've stated, all that information was summarized into a baseline document. And the intent here now is we're taking the stones that we've overturned, kind of tried to summarize it and to provide it to the planning team so that they've got a place to start. So it's organized in each of the sectors of the potential plan. Each sector's got a little bit of a summary of some of the information that we found, and then some illustrations of potential approaches. And what we're trying to do here is to say, hey, if we wanted to say, let's increase energy efficiency, let's just make up a scenario and say, well, what if we had 15% of the community residents improve their energy efficiency by 10%? I'm making those numbers up right here. But what would that do in terms of total energy savings and emission savings? And so our intent here is to create linkage, so that as people talk about goals, we can provide some sort of a foundation for deciding, is that goal really aggressive? Is it really achievable? Etc. At the end of each section, then, we've put forth preliminary goals that are starter places. It's sort of saying, well, if I were doing this plan in a vacuum, that's probably where I'd start. And again, the intent here is just to give people a place to start. And those actually are up on the wall, and we'd love people's input on them. Like them, hate them, love them, something's missing, needs to be tweaked, etc. And as I've said, this is all just a place to start. All of those potential goals then have been modeled for their collective impacts. And again, we're just doing this so we can create linkage, so that if we start saying, well, this goal is too strong, we need to take it down, or this goal is too weak, we need to change it, or we need to add goals, or whatever, we can have already in place a model that we can understand how that might impact overall potential. The goals that are up on the wall as starter do have significant potential for emissions reductions. They could achieve through 2030 a 35% reduction below 2022 levels, and could put the community on a path towards carbon neutrality towards 2050. As I say, this is just the starting point for the conversation and for the planning team's work. So there's two ways that everybody can get involved right now, that in this still early on process before we've created the plan. One is that we've got a survey available. It's been open since, I think it's August that it was opened up. And I know the city's advertised it a number of times, but it's available just through next 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, the 14th. So if you've already taken the survey, thank you so much. If you know folks that you want to share it with, that'd be awesome, because we're trying to get the word out there. If you have not yet taken the survey, it'd be great to have your input. And again, if there are others that you want to share with, that's great. The other way that you can give input are giving us your thoughts on these potential goals. What you think about the goals, if you think a goal is missing, if you think a goal is not the right goal, if you have a way that you think a goal could be improved, whatever your feedback on the goals would be great. As well as if you've got any detailed action ideas. That's fantastic. We definitely want to get any detailed actions that you may have. For anybody that's online, we have a link to an online form. That's that horrendous link down at the bottom that's impossible to read, but it is linkable. So you can do it online also. So that's what we're hoping for tonight, and I'm happy to receive some questions or see what anybody has to share. But then we definitely want to try to have time for folks to give us feedback on the goals. Okay. Yes?
Can you go back to one of the maps of Fitchburg in terms of maybe the canopy coverage?
I'm sorry, would you mind? I couldn't quite hear that first part.
Sorry, can you go back to one of the maps of Fitchburg in terms of the canopy coverage?
Sure, going back to the map of Fitchburg with canopy coverage. It's back here just a little bit.
So you can stop there, actually.
Okay, that's okay.
So is that highway, what is it, 18 or 14? That's the cutoff there on the right?
Yeah, near Highway 18, yeah.
So are the communities east of that going to get anything with the white?
Yes, so that's a great question. So the mapping that was done on the census tract basis purely because we wanted to be able to create linkage to data. And unfortunately, that census tract goes way the heck, I mean, it goes like really far to the east, way off the map. So just looking at total population count, we collectively made the decision that it doesn't really make sense to do that because it might skew too much the rest of the city data. But potential actions or strategies, so if there is a goal that says, hey, we want to increase trees, it would be applied to the city, not just what is showing up on the map.
Okay.
So it would be equitably provide. It would be, the intent would be any goals relative to everybody living inside of Fitchburg, not just a goofy census tract map.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'd love to add just a little bit. We, as Ted mentioned, we do have tree canopy goals already that we're aware of where the needs are throughout the city. Staff talked about this. We chatted with Ted about it, and yeah, as he mentioned, some of those census tracts don't really overlap well. Some maps that are available also right now don't include the portions of the town of Madison that Fitchburg annexed. So like Southdale is not included on some of the maps, and it's just what data was available when we did this work. The staff is very much aware of these gaps where there's overlap and where there's not, and anything that is in the plan here that doesn't necessarily cover Fitchburg in its entirety, we're going to make sure we're applying it to Fitchburg as we have it right now and as our goals are set. You'll even notice here off to the left of Fitchburg, some of those census tracts bleed into Madison. We're not planting trees in Madison. That's not our jurisdiction. So yeah, it's a really good question, but definitely something we're going to be keeping in mind.
So from my understanding, downtown Fitchburg is going to be built in that direction. Is that true? Have you heard of anything like that? Or was that something my neighbor randomly told me?
Towards the east, you mean?
Yeah.
Downtown Fitchburg is it's an interesting phrase. There is more development planned on the east side of Fitchburg. We've got Terravessa already. There's uptown development. There is more development that will occur there. Again, something that we'll absolutely keep in mind, and even something I report to the bike committee as well. And we're looking at we're going to have to update our bike and pedestrian plan because we've got a lot of new portions of Fitchburg that weren't there even 7 years ago. So yeah, we're keeping things refreshed as we go along for sure.
And relative to this, I can also reiterate, so the awkwardness of census tract versus city boundary is particularly acute in Fitchburg. Some communities, it's really, we've got one community we're doing right now where it's handy dandy, they all line up, it's amazing, it's beautiful. But so it doesn't, and so there's an awkwardness there. But the gist of it is that we do that so that we can make some suggestions relative to, again, if we plant a tree, how do we think about it where it's providing as much service as possible? Or, if there's a grant, somebody's got a grant that says, hey, there's $1,000 to plant trees in your community. Where can we take advantage of that funding to do the greatest benefit for the community? And so that's why we relate it to census tract, is so that we can look at both the geographic potentials, because we're looking at impervious surfaces and tree canopy cover and grass cover, so we can create relationships there, but then also look at demographic potentials. Do we have lots of families with children? Do we have lots of folks that are lower income or might have other vulnerability considerations? And therefore we can create a structure to say where might you want to prioritize. So that's the reason for the mapping in and of itself. But it isn't to exclude the potential of new trees or actions for everybody living in Fitchburg. So thanks for asking that. Was there? Yes?
To cut down emissions control on all these stupid vehicles running up and down the roads when people are going to go to eat, wouldn't it be simple for the city to, way back when they were planning, that some of these places where they put all these apartments and all this stuff, that they planned that would be a good place to plan and get people with these restaurants. Not just, walk in and walk out. These people that want to walk in, sit down and have a meal. Right now, there is nothing. It's zero.
Yeah.
Everything, Fitch Actually, there's a bar there, but, there's no restaurant anywhere. What could be? Either I got to drive all the way into Madison, Verona, Oregon, Stoughton, McCarl to eat. Now, if you're talking about cutting down emissions, wouldn't you think about how can we stop the traffic from going down the road so much?
Yeah, actually,
like on the belt line, they already said after the rush hour, the traffic's on the belt line, people go to eat.
Yeah. You've hit on a couple points. In fact, on the transportation sector, which I think is up there. I'm sorry, I can't recall where it is. But on the transportation sector, there's actually two potential goals that relate to what you're talking about here. One is the idea of reducing what we call VMT, vehicle miles traveled. And so then there's different strategies that one might look at relative to that, whether it's public transit or alternative modes. Do we have biking or other opportunities, carpooling or other shared mobility? But the other potential goal that also addresses exactly what you're saying, we talk about it in terms of density, but that's the idea of saying that, look, we've got land that's developed, used for buildings and such. We've got land that's not, whether it's agriculture or forest or green space. And the idea of increasing density, which is intended to come with the idea of, hey, how do we live, work, recreate, eat, in spaces that we can get to easily. And usually we talk about that through density, sort of appropriate density to achieve that exact thing.
Just another thing, what do you think about when a city decides not to finish off what's city and go and start going off into the rural?
Well, that's a complex question.
I'm saying that now because the city right now is trying to put a 20-year plan in, and everybody, 110% that was at the meeting said no. They're going to push it anyways. They just told us, they just went through the routine of going through the motions. But wouldn't the city be safer or better off to finish what they started? And I love trees. I live out in the rural, so if you talk about trees, I love them. But
Yeah.
I mean, paving everything.
Yeah.
And then the bike paths. That's not gravel anymore. That's all blacktop. That's that's going ruining our with the heat off those bike paths.
Yeah. Those are good comments. And if you have a chance, it'd be great. You could put your thoughts on the board too, so we can make sure to capture them. That'd be great. Thank you. There's Post-its and pens, by the way, for everybody. Yes, sir.
You've started off highlighting a lot of issues that are of national concern, but they're very controversial, and some of the things you said aren't resolved really, and some of these things would be better solved at a state level or a national level, but I'm thinking of some of the things that came up here, and there's three things that come to my mind here that aren't really resolved. The Keystone Pipeline, there is arguments for and against it. The problems they had in Texas with their energy supply and their wind generators that weren't generated. And thirdly, the electric vehicles, which all of a sudden we find out the Americans are rejecting. So many of the things that we're talking about are bigger than Fitchburg. They're on a national level. And I guess maybe it's premature for me to make some of these comments because I don't know what the details of a plan for Fitchburg might look like. When I came here today, it was really because I had I thought that maybe some of these issues would immediately come up, but obviously it's too early for that. So where am I? Well, that's why I asked where are we in the process. I guess what you're saying is it's just getting started. And likely at a later date I'd like to see, usually the way these things work when we have plans for Fitchburg, it's usually an effort to channel all the discussion into almost a preconceived, predetermined conclusion. But I would like to see two or more alternative visions compete with each other and let the public weigh in on which vision they think is best for Fitchburg. But I think what happened is a lot of these meetings that I've been to, it's an effort to channel everything toward one goal. And I'll leave it there.
Well, those are great points, and so that's part of the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to show you here's some potential goals that we want your input on. We want to know what you think about those. So we'd love for your thoughts. Again, you can do them online or you can do them tonight with the Post-its. We'd love your ideas on those goals. The other thing that I will point out is that you're absolutely certain that when we're thinking about some of the aspects that are global impact or a global phenomenon, it is a global issue, which is also a national issue. But like anything that's a national issue, it does aggregate down to local. And in fact, there's been the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a UN science panel. They aggregate science from around the world for policymakers. They have illustrated and documented studies that illustrate that local action can actually achieve 40%. Local governments, local communities acting on their own without concern of national action can achieve 40% of the reductions and change that we need to make. 40% is not all of it, but 40% is an awful lot. So what that illustrates is that it's just like the old saying that's been around since the 70s, think global, act local. It's the same on any issue, right? If there's something that we want to see in the world, we can do something about it. And certainly what the rest of the country does or the rest of the world does. We are interconnected. But I think there's good illustration that taking action can be beneficial on a global scale. But most importantly is the kinds of actions, if you look at sustainability plans or plans that are similar to what this ultimately would be, the kinds of actions that end up being in there tend to be able to support increasing livability and quality of life considerations. The idea of let's protect green space, let's plant trees, more trees where it's appropriate, let's swap out for native grasses or wildflowers to increase water absorption, etc. These are all things that, when done nicely, when done well, improve quality of life. Let's think about density and reducing vehicle travel, making it easier to get to a place I'm going to recreate or have dinner in a more convenient, less travel-heavy way. Those are livability considerations, right? That also then have benefit on a local, regional, and national scale.
So many of those issues are controversial and political. And, there isn't one set solution to these problems. There's alternative thoughts on it. And, I don't know if here's the place to discuss those things because, like I said, it's a bigger issue than Fitchburg.
Yeah, well, we'd love any thought. And I will also point out that actually it's less controversial than it used to be. Actually, the majority of people in the county, and in fact, according to Yale, does a scientific study every 2 years on opinion. And as of 2021, every county in the country actually has a majority of residents that support these kinds of actions. Every county in the country. So think of the county that you would think would be most concerned about this. There's still actually a majority of folks that support it. So I think the controversy's been there, but I think a lot of people are recognizing that we can do some positive things and it does have benefit. So.
And bringing it down to Fitchburg specifically, to address your first concern, definitely understand the concern that the city just wants to do something, whether or not the public is in favor of it. This is part of why we're trying to solicit community feedback. This is why we have the community survey that's been out. We've got over 550 responses right now. It's been a really robust response. We want more. My goal, I told Ted on day one, I want 1,000 responses. He said, okay, well, you blow past the response rate we've had for any community. I said, great, let's get there. We want as much feedback as we can possibly get. From the first 550 responses, the overwhelming sentiment is people are concerned about climate change, people want the city to take action, and they want to be able to give this feedback and they want to be a part of the solution. Yes, we want national leadership on this and we want state leadership, and that comes in the form of things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the single biggest climate investment in our history. There is a ton of federal dollars now flowing down in the form of grants that are available to local communities that say, we want to pursue this project. We maybe can't fund it entirely ourselves. We don't have the budget. Funding is tight right now on a local level. But there are millions, tens of millions of dollars available for things like putting out EV chargers, for planting more trees, for doing more environmental justice, for, as we look at our police services facility, trying to find ways to reduce the energy impact of that as we add a new building. So this is where that local and national meet, is that they're providing the tools for us to be able to take action without feeling like we're on an island by ourselves. But when the community says this is a really important thing, we do want to respond to that as well. If the sentiment had been 95%, we don't think this is a big deal, you shouldn't do this, we might be having a different conversation right now. But it's absolutely not where the overwhelming sentiment has been.
Well, what you said is actually part of the problem, because people think that if it comes from the Fed, it's free. It's not free. We pay for it. And when you ask some of these questions, are you for something? You have to ask that, are you for it, and how much are you willing to pay? Because it will give you different results.
I'll say from my years of studying in environment and sustainability, one of the difficulties that we run into in this field frequently is that the costs of action in this are very easy to quantify. The benefits are not always as upfront, and so it feels like this is just expensive. But if you look at something like increasing public transit and bicycling, if more people are biking, that's physical exercise, that improves your health, that very likely decreases medical bills in the short and medium term. If you're doing more public transit, it decreases vehicle congestion, which means there are fewer emissions on the road, and now pedestrians walking across the street are inhaling fewer carcinogenic fumes. The embedded economic benefits of having clean water and trees. There are a lot of people far smarter than I am who are putting numbers to these, but still it's an imperfect science. And so a lot of the benefits are out there. We don't necessarily have the numbers to fully wrap them up together. There was just a study that came out that, if we pushed to more sustainable food systems, we could gain $10 trillion in benefits just based on reduced environmental impact and health benefits. But so many of these benefits are things that are kind of second and third degree down the line. They're down the road in terms of number of years. So that payback is often there. And, again, there are smarter economic minds who are figuring out how we're paying for it in Washington. I try not to worry myself too much with that. If the money's there and it's available for us to use, I'd like to be able to use it. But the plan is going to help us prioritize which of those dollars do we actually seek. Do we look at it for transportation or buildings or something else?
So I think we have the room for another half hour or something. Is that right?
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is I can hang around. I'm happy to answer questions, get into dialogue, but I'd really like to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas, because that's the point. We want to hear what your thoughts are, and it'd be fantastic if you'd like to just take a moment to look at some of the potential ideas and share your ideas, what you think about them. There's Post-it notes. You can write your thoughts down. If you have ideas on actions, ideas on different goals, how you think it could be improved, we would really love to get that.
Or different ideas on ways to improve our outreach.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Whatever idea you have, we're looking to be able to collect. And I can be here and I can continue to have answer questions or chat. So.
I have a question about the slide.
Yeah.
Where can people find this link?
Yeah, so this link, it's in, all of this information is on our website, the Pale Blue Dot Period LLC, Fitchburg Sustainability.
You can also go to Fitchburg's website, go to Green Fitchburg, or just search the Fitchburg website for sustainability plan, and I've got everything linked there as well.
Yeah. And we can even get this presentation on there. I can get
it will be.
Yeah.
Hey Phil, is that link at the bottom, is that on the Fitchburg website?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't see it on there.
I just put it up there this evening, but it's there.
This meeting, page,